And we should have the recording on now. So, hi everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us during the 24 hours of Ateme challenge. I will be presenting how to optimize your distribution to affiliates. My name is Robin Herron, and I'm one of the senior solutions engineer at Ateme. So, just a few words about myself and Amarkar. I've been working with Ateme for 4.5 years now. First worked both on North America and South America as a solutions engineer. And Amarkar himself has been working with us for almost a year now, joining us after working with both AdTech and Imagine and working as a consultant on cloud applications. I will first give you a bit of an intro on the company for those of you who don't know us before jumping into the main topic of this presentation, which is primary distribution. So about Ateme, pretty quick. The company is now 29 years old, based out of France. We were seen before as the emerging video leader, with a French company that came into the US as a small company with not a couple of people that were in the US, but most of the resources that were in France, in Paris HQ, with R&D in Rennes. We were known to be the first to market 10-bit 422 solution, the first production-ready HEVC or HDR solution as well. But there's been a bit of a change now in the way we're seeing in the industry, at least in a couple of past years, in the United States, as we've come from being one of the emerging video leaders to being one of the actual people leading the pack. By which we mean all of those innovative features, being the first solution to market for 4-10 bits, came to give us references into the contribution and distribution VOD applications with many customers in the US and abroad. Those customers of us that we started building partnerships with them, not only with the tier 1, but also on many levels now, as we start even building up into the ETSI 1 markets, ETSI 1 and 3 market actually. But also build partnerships with people who are involved in the industry, such as Intel, Dell, HP as well. That led us to having profitability and predictability in terms of how much of a safe player can we be. Ateme is financially still pretty strong. We've been publicly listed since 2014, profitable already since 2016, and we've shown 9 years of year-over-year growth. That, in return, came into showing a lot of investment being done. I was one of the first people to come to the US, based out of Miami at the time. We're now showing quite a big, team actually out of the US entirely, with almost 45 people. We're closing into 50, hopefully, to 300 people in the entire world, mostly focused on R&D. Which, again, that R&D in returns allows us to spend more resources on research activities, which is the core of what we do as a company. We want to be the VQ leader in the industry. So now, just a couple of points as to what I'm going to discuss in this presentation, focused on primary distribution. First, a section, a couple of slides focused on the market landscape and the new trends that we see in the primary distribution market. In second, what is the Ateme value proposition? And in third, how Titan as a solution can answer the pain points of the primary distribution markets and use cases. So first, the main trend that I think everybody on this call is going to see and has seen already the effects of is the content and service provider consolidation. Obviously, that's a direct result of the direct-to-consumer trend. The idea, as we say in Ateme, that content is king, that what matters in the end is how we can get directly to the end user, to the consumer, the content. That resulted in a lot of service providers either merging, acquiring, or working directly with content providers within the industry. In return, the consequences of that movement means that content providers are now equipped with additional means to reach top-tier service providers, to reach their affiliates. Through that consolidation and the emergence of new protocols dedicated to reliable and secure IP delivery, such as, I'm thinking ARQ protocols, ZXC, SRT, potentially RIST as well. Now, those content providers now have access to additional tools to broadcast their content. We are seeing as well some use cases where potential crossovers are seen between companies within, the channel lineup of a single transponder. That means that you may see two different content providers that were not part of the same group before, now having to mix and match their content between different transponders that they were not sharing before. Spectrum reduction. This is a big item actually on the roadmap, not just for Ateme or the industry, but also for the entire country. The FCC has decided to speed up actually its 5G roadmap back in 2018. The entire point was to be able to free up some space, to give that space back and dedicate it to the 5G roadmap that the country has. In September 2018, the FCC gave a proposal for the reallocation of the C-band satellite spectrum and giving half of it and dedicated to, again, the 5G roadmap. The US satellite vendors decided to constitute an alliance at the time called the C-band Alliance to represent their own interests and put a proposal together and work with the FCC, on these matters. The latest news on that is that Eutelsat exited in end of 2019, Intelsat exited earlier this year, and that they decided to represent their own interests themselves with the FCC. And in 2020, the FCC confirmed that there will be a public auction that would take place for this for the bandwidth that needs to be reallocated. Obviously, the consequences of the reduction of the spectrum means a lot of people are now looking into more efficient compression solutions, either with an AVC refresh or an HEVC upgrade, or potential alternatives to satellite delivery as a way to deliver their primary distribution feeds, basically. Satellite, for example, may not be needed for their top tier 1, tier 2 affiliates, only for the tier 3. So what we're seeing as well, and again, all of those are influenced, or there are intricacies between those three different trends, is that a lot of our customers and a lot of content providers are now starting to test for potential clouds primary distribution workflows. It can be seen either as an offload to public clouds for disaster recovery, or as a way for them to mutualize their distribution delivery to include IP workflows, whether it is OTT, mezzanine feeds, mezzanine fees delivery as a premium feed to their affiliates, or as a way to add distribution, OTT distribution, for example. Cost is definitely a driver for a move to a public cloud, with very big differences between small or relatively small content providers who may not see the benefit of switching, from an on-prem to public cloud on the long run. Or if you remember slide 1, content providers who were part of a consolidation may actually have access to additional contracts with public clouds now through their relationship with their own service provider, which in returns allow them to have a lower cost of running instances on, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, any of those guys. Now, just to focus on the Ateme, what is the Ateme value proposition in the primary distribution use case? So there's a lot of information here on this slide, but I really want to spend quite a bit of time on this. What Ateme can help you with is basically save transponder density. We can enable those transponder savings through the encoding efficiency we can achieve with our software encoder, our live encoder. What you see up there with the results is basically the results that we had with one of our customers on statistical multiplexing within a transponder for primary distribution. What we saw is that we are either equal or better than what they have as an incumbent solution for primary distribution use case, Their use case was they currently have 8 channels of 1080i30 MPEG-4 CDR in 72 megs. And we were able to show that with our statistical multiplexing, we can do equal or better with 12 channels of HD H.264. That means an additional 50% of transport density compared to the solution they currently have. And not only were able to actually show this with, side-by-side videos with actual evaluation that was made visually with some of their golden eyes or VQ experts, we're actually also able to run an objective VQ evaluations with the results that you actually see in that table up there, which are PSNR scores. So again, the rule of thumb that we've seen based on our tests is that very often in the primary distribution market, what we see is that we have a lot of people still have incumbent encoding that is slightly aging, and it's AVC encoding aging AVC encoding. Compared to those, Ateme today can simply take care of replacing the encoding done at the head end and still achieve 50% additional transported density. Now, if we talk about HEVC, we can as well have an additional 67% additional transported density. Obviously, those numbers depend on content, depend on your satellite parameters as well. So just to give you a simple example, below, I wanted to show you 2 examples for sports and movies based on a 72 megs transponder, which is DVB-S2 APS-K 30 megahertz 5.6. So in the case of sports, what we would see is we can easily go up to 10 AVC channels and up to 12 AVC channels. Based on feedback from customers, this is pretty decent encoding. Some customers may want to go for more, may go for less, but usually we are confident that this is the density you can achieve within a transponder that will allow you to show good VQ all the way to the affiliates. Same thing in the case of the movie. In the case of movie contents, we are confident that we can achieve up to 12 AVC channels within a 72 megs transponder and up to 15 HEVC channels. Personally, during tests, I've seen people going up to 15 AVC and still feel confident with it. But again, it depends on what the approach of the customers is and how high the VQ needs to be when it arrives at the affiliate level, at the affiliate side. So how did we get to achieve such results? Well, if you remember one of the very first slides I introduced when I spoke about the company, Ateme has now for many years been one of the leaders in the industry when it comes to visual quality. We have been involved into most of the standards that are now being used within the industry. All of what you see on these slides is some of the latest ones that we were involved in. Obviously, we're working on VVC as the next step in compression to HEVC, which would allow us, for example, to compress, 8K down to 26 megs. We've been involved with the Alliance for Open Media as well for the standardization of AV1. And again, even before this, we were involved in MPEG 2, MPEG 4, with all of the different units, whether it's DVB, MPEG, SMT as well, that are involved within the standardization of those codecs. But on top of this, Ateme obviously has, we have our own dedicated video processing units that works on improving our own video quality. That has lately emerged into the following 4 points that we were pointing out. Basically, what we see in the video industry is that newer standards are becoming more and more complex, and the processing requirements are actually becoming higher than what we see in Moore's law, which is the number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years, but cost cut in half. The cost is cut in half. Well, in the case of the video compression, the cost may be cut in half, but the needs that we have for CPU processing are much higher, which means there is a need right there to solve a high complexity that we're getting with those video codecs that cannot just simply be solved with throwing more CPU at it. There needs to be, an additional VQ expertise. The way Ateme wants to go at it is by actually implementing machine learning within our product, which is the idea of feeding thousands of contents to our encoder and seeing how it actually reacts based on the type of content that it is, the resolution, how different codecs may or may not have the best tools to actually answer a specific situation within a content. And this way, learn from it and have our encoder basically improved based on those contents, on this huge database of contents. One example that was not done through machine learning, but done specifically with the movie industry, is how on the file side at first, and now working on the live side, we have addressed the film grain. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, a lot of content creators now create their TV shows or their movies with film grain as a way to improve the authenticity of the actual content. Obviously, film grain for an encoder is incredibly hard to compress. It's very often perceived as noise. It may be processed with basically being smooth out of the encoder. It may not necessarily, or it may be just seen completely as noise with the encoder actually trying to process it with the denoiser. What we've done on our side is to actually implement a proper film grain optimization, although allowing us to then see the results that we see now in primary distributions in the case of movie content, where we can go as high as, again, 15 HD channels, for example, in a 72 megs transponder in the case of movie content providers. So finally, just to focus on something that is quite specific, but has been asked quite a bit by a lot of our content providers. There's been a lot of questions on HEVC interlaced encoding. It seems like a lot of our customers felt like HEVC encoding was not necessarily seen as viable, that it felt like it was not necessarily working. Well, on the Ateme side, we can assure you that 1080i30 is actually a solution. Interlaced HEVC encoding works. Ateme has actually contributed to the actual standard itself right from the beginning. We confirmed as well, so for people who are thinking of just doing directly the upgrade to 1080p60 instead of doing 1080i30, well, if you stay in 1080i30, there is still an increased bandwidth saving of 30%. But at the same time, if you expect your affiliates to do the deinterlacing on their side, well, at least you may be in control of the deinterlacing on the head-end side. And we have a pretty good deinterlacing. So it's a give and take. But the solution works. We've been part of the standard for a while now. We've had many successful deployments, whether it is in EMEA, but we've also had quite a few projects in the US now. And we've been working with set-top box manufacturers for a while as well. So now just to focus on what is Titan as a solution and how it actually can help you solve the many pain points of the primary distribution industry and use case. So Titan, as the title suggests actually, and as the slide suggests, is like legal for adults. So the idea would be that instead of thinking in terms of products and how you can fit a vendor's products within your workflow, you basically just have to pick and choose which functions out of these many blocks, these many modules you actually want, and you can put them into your own customized workflow that will fit then all of your own applications. Obviously, in the primary distribution industry, what we see usually is, a live encoder, a MUX with both of them working on a statistical multiplexing, and then a solution at the edge with a management system supervising those. Well, that solution is actually available today on the Ateme side with, first of all, the Ateme management system, which is in charge of the blackouts and retune capabilities based on the schedule, in charge of the mass configuration and software updates, and in charge of what we call the SSU assets, which is basically leveraging what you see here in the DVB, in the SSU server, as the system software updates. It's a DVB standard defining the ability to push for files within an MPEG-TS stream, which basically means that the file gets streamed progressively alongside the other ES. On top of this, we have ready right now our own StatMux solution, which is at the head end for the satellite uplink with encryption management, with inbound control. We already spoke about the encoding StatMux, but we also have UHD, HEVC, HDR uplink if necessary. And 50% additional density. That's what we've seen based on, again, incumbent solutions. On top of the satellite uplink, there is a way with the same product, the same Titan solution, to have alternative IP path and delivery, whether it is over ARQ, SRT, ZXC. We're also working on REST as well. And finally, on the affiliate side, you have your IP, ARQ, or satellite reception, transcoding, scaling, and splicing, and insertion, actually. So now, just to go a little bit more in detail, let's focus first on the encoding in StatMux. So the idea of a StatMux, I think everybody now is familiar with it. The idea of a StatMux is to enhance and optimize the video quality within a pool of services within a transponder by allocating bits depending on their complexity. That means the encoder actually sends statistics about VQ versus bit rates when the pictures are analyzed to the MUX. And they will also send what we call non-video statistics, which is bit rates for audio, subtitles, and so on. Every 40 minutes, the StatMux will actually send the rate controller of the encoder, the write curves and the write instructions to adapt the bit rates of each channel based on the best quality it can achieve for each channel. By default, we want to have each channel have an equal VQ, but we have in our StatMux the ability to achieve, for example, different VQ in each channel. Let's say, for example, your #1 channel is the one that is the most used by consumers, or is the one that is the most used by your affiliates. You may want to allocate more bits to that one. Well, we actually have the ability to do that, for example, in our StatMux. But on top of this, the efficiency of our MUX actually comes from what we call VBR reservation. It is basically the ability to reallocate bits from what we were mentioning earlier, the non-video statistics. That means, let's say you have an audio PID going silent, we will take those bits and reallocate those to video. The most common use case is actually coming from closed captioning, where closed captioning is actually only sending bits very little compared to the 40 millisecond instructions that we need, where we need to send instruction to the rate controller of the encoder. That means it can easily add up to 1, 2, 3 megs worth of data, depending on the amount of channels that you have in your transponder, that can be then reallocated to video instead of just simply being fixed, dedicated bit rates that is only allocated to the closed captioning. On top of this, I think one of the many pain points of the industry in general, but also of primary distribution, is piracy. I think we in the US know that in IPTV systems are making more and more money in general, mostly with content focused on sports. Set TV now was the first major IPTV provider that was shut down. I think it was last year. apparently they had an access to live TV streams for $20 a month with, at their peak, 180,000 subscribers. We're talking about, and just one of them that was accumulating over $3.6 million a month worth of money, basically, that could have been prevented through the use of encryption. Well, Ateme is an encryption agnostic player in the industry. That means our Titan MUX, our MUX capabilities comes with certifications from NAGRA, from Cisco, with interop capacity with other CAS systems. We're talking about here in this slide are Ardado, Verimetrics, Connex, and we have been involved in on the encryption side for quite a while to make sure that the content can be delivered end to end without any risks. And we've actually been involved in a way that we started working with EBU on the next implementation of BISS, which we called BISS-CA. And again, this is not a proprietary standard. This is actually an open source standard, that we worked on with the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union. The idea at first was to help them make sure that their content could be delivered all the way to the affiliates without being broken. Because today, if you think about BIS1, 128 bits key for BIS1 can actually be broken pretty fast. That means then obviously you're putting your content at risk from being, used for malicious purposes. Well, the concept of BISS-CA is simply to have two different keys, one that is public, that will be rolling key, that will be a rolling public key based on a period that you define, but usually by default it's 30 seconds, and a private key that is hard-coded and local to the edge receiver that is on the affiliate side. This way, with a combination of both, it's much harder to actually be able to decrypt and have access to the actual contents inside your streams, basically, to have access to those streams. Currently, the University of Geneva actually made some tests themselves to be able to try to see if they could break into to break the encryption system that we had, and so far they have not been able to break BISS-CA as an encryption to our content. And finally, on top of the encryption, we also work with watermarking technologies, just to make sure that, again, if broadcasters, if there was a potential misappropriation of assets, broadcasters would at least be able to identify when and where this happened within their workflows to make sure they could prevent that content, again, from being used for potential malicious purposes. So now, focusing on the Ateme management system. The idea here with our management system is to solve one pain point, which is the remote management of the IRDs. But the Ateme management software system can actually do much more. We can obviously handle the monitoring, the redundancy at the head end, but we can also do the remote update, for example, of your IRDs, sorry. We can also handle the mass configuration updates, and one of those many aspects that we can do is blackouts and retunes. The AMS can also be very much customized to your needs by having some, for example, the GUI set in a way that the operators only have to go through one single GUI to have access to the entire pool of content they have to handle. So on the RD side, the blackouts and retunes is obviously one of the main features that we need to have on the management system. With the main pain points here being that being the ability to black out and retune IRDs either based on a schedule or a contract. In the case of a schedule, that means you may have to retune or black out your IRDs. Let's say a sports network broadcasts, for example, the Boston Celtics game nationally. They will have to black out that channel or retune the IRDs in that area, as most likely the rights to that game in that area belong to a different entity or a local station. On the other end, they may also have to black out IRDs based on contracts. I think we're all familiar now that in the United States, and since October 2018, HBO isn't available on Dish anymore. Well, that's actually something that the engineers from HBO were able to do within a matter of seconds, simply by blacking out those IRDs through the management system that they have. And finally, on the IRD side, the solution that we have on the IRD side is called Titan Edge. It's a pure software solution that you can easily customize on your needs. That means we can easily deliver basically what you have based on the contracts that were done between you and your affiliates. Usually there's two different use cases. That means based on past experiences, we've seen either decoding for SDI delivery, but the most common one is having to first pass through the VBR that was coming in as satellite inputs, then transcode to CBR MPEG for HD for linear applications, then transcode to CBR MPEG-2 for HD for linear application, and then the downscale to SD MPEG-2. So again, the whole entire point of this product is that we actually have the capability with a single product to actually enable both solutions, regardless of what your contract actually forces you or asks you to do as a content provider. The advantage of having a pure software solution is that we have an entirely full upgrade path to, for example, full HD, if currently you're doing 720p or 1080i. We have UHD capabilities in the product already. And for example, with the pure software solutions, when HDR flavors comes in and so on, you can easily add them to the product with a simple software updates. And that's where, for example, the AMS comes into play, as updates can be pushed remotely with the DVB SSU that I was mentioning earlier. And on top of that, a lot of people who have known us since the early days of the industry have known us for our CM5000, our DR5000 FPGA appliances, which we still sell, which we still maintain, which we still update, actually, even with new features. Currently, we're working on SRT, for example, and RISC as well. Well, we wanted to have the best of both worlds between having a pure CPU solution running on a COTS server and having an FPGA appliance with a look and feel, of an appliance. So to do that, we actually developed our own custom front panel that is basically displaying, the thumbnail with your contents. If you have multiple channels, you can actually go through the channels directly on the screen with the dial. You have a USB plug, so you can actually plug, for example, software updates that can be done through the USB plugs. Basically have a front panel that can be used by the operators on the field. What was important in this. On top of this, we actually developed as well a scrambling slots for a cam module, actually. That's what I meant. A cam module that can fit into the hard drive slots on the server to allow you, for example, for a simple IRD reception and gateway application. In the case of primary distribution, we could use those for as a CAM module to use and basically entitle or not the IRD. Just to come as a quick conclusion, as I'm reaching 42 minutes in this presentation, and to give us at least 10 minutes to do the Q&A. Ateme today can help you answer the pain points of the primary distribution industry and can help providing an end-to-end solution from the playouts as presented earlier today by my colleague Pierre, who was the product owner, or just actually last hour by Germán in the virtual programming presentation, all the way to the affiliates with Titan as a solution. But solving the only problems of primary distributions over satellites is not looking into the additional capabilities of what Titan can do for you today, which is not only taking care of your primary distribution over satellite needs, but taking care of every other type of distribution you may want to do as well on the side. That means having the ability to, for example, have premium mid-sending feeds delivered over dedicated fiber, for example, which would then in return allow you to renegotiate some of the contracts that you may have with your affiliate saying, well, I could deliver you this channel lineup over satellites, but I could also deliver to you high quality, high definition content at 25 megs, for example, per second, H.264 directly over IP if you have the link for it. Since again, the entire mention in this case would be that content is king and VQ, video quality is the thing that matters is to the end user. We can also do and take care with the same product, the same Titan solution. We can also take care of IP delivery over the public internet with encryption and ARQ at the same time. That means you could see ZXI with AES, for example, coming in as a solution. And finally, we could also, with, again, that same Titan solution, take care of your OTT workflows and your OTT live distribution. And I'm at 45 minutes, which is time for any Q&A that you guys may have.
Excellent, Robin. So yeah, we have a few questions here in the room. Let's just take these certain order. So they're all anonymous. Do you see customers looking to adopt HEVC for primary distribution?
So for primary distribution, yes, but maybe not at the point of deploying yet. Obviously, the main driver for that would be the cost of potentially having to replace some of the IRDs. On our side, what we see is we want to enable both solutions. So if you're a customer who wants to switch to HEVC, we can do it today. If you want to have a transition period where we first take care of an AVC refresh on the head end and then move over to HEVC later on, that's feasible as well. Both solutions are enabled, and the tendency shows that most likely a lot of customers are mostly looking into first doing an AVC refresh and then potentially talking about an upgrade path to HEVC on the head end and the IRDs later on.
Yeah, especially because when you have 1,000 IRDs, by just going up, just switching to the ABC gives you over 50% efficiency. So that it's too big of a project to do at one time, right? So most of our customers, they want to see, they want to use ABC for in the meantime, start replacing receivers, and then do a switch to HEVC. Another question here, are there any cost royalties for BISS-CA?
Not as far as I'm aware of. Again, it's an open standard that was implemented with ABU, and I'm not aware of any custom royalties for BISS-CA.
Yep.
But if this is a question of if this is really a big item, we can actually take care of this offline with our manager on our contribution use cases, which is Julien Mondel, who will also have the answer.
Actually, we also have another session later today focused around BISS-CA. It's being presented at Yannick. Okay, so what are the advantages of doing primary distribution via IP versus satellite, or are there any?
I would say the primary distribution of the satellites, the one thing that needs to happen is that if you're doing primary distribution over a satellite, it has to go on-prem, no matter what. There will need to be a modulator at some point for the satellite uplink. The main advantage of having primary distribution done over IP is that you can basically do your entire workflow over IP, which means you can do it on-prem, on the cloud. You have a very easy capability of mutualizing all of your workflows into a single one, having, again, your MES feeds that need to go to some of your affiliates, your OTT live distribution, if you have any, all of your potential live encoding over IP being done within a single solution. You have the ability to mutualize all of those applications and unify them into a single system. There's the main advantage of going over IP rather than satellites. At the same time, as I'm saying this, satellites, not everyone has necessarily, not every affiliate has a crazy amount of, fiber optics that are available all across the country and so on. And so the main advantage of satellite is, well, it has a higher reachability than over IP and reliance at such a high, amount of people that it reaches. That's the main advantages of both that I would see.
We should also mention, right, that with IP distribution, you incur 500 milliseconds less latency typically than satellite.
Yeah, that is correct.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and again, that's where we see a difference between people who are doing live primary distribution and people who are and people who are doing playout of offline files, for example, who then started moving their playout applications to the cloud. Excuse me, and their entire head end actually from the playout to basically to the encryption piece to the cloud. The encryption piece and modulation are then being done usually on-prem, since the encryption needs to be done and authentication needs to be done based on contracts and so on for the blackouts.
We have two more questions. I think we still have time. We have about 9 minutes. How is Ateme ABC encoding better than the existing ABC solution? I think you addressed this earlier, but it's worth reiterating. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, you have to understand, just like one of the previous presentations that was done on HCSC, HCSC1, for example, uses MPEG-2. MPEG-2 was actually standardized about almost 30 years ago now. What we see on the field when we have, shootouts and POCs and projects or even deployments actually, is that people don't get to do an HEVC refresh, you know, every 2 years when there's a new tool that is implemented on their by their encoding vendor. Usually they purchased an encoder that was maybe 3, 5, sometimes even 10 years ago, where they didn't get the chance to update the software onto it because it was an appliance at the time. Well, that's the advantage. Not only that's the advantage of going with Ateme. Not only do we have a software appliance, which means that we can get the best of the latest CPUs today, which means we get to use more tools out of the HEVC standard into our own codecs, into our own implementation of the of our core encoding. We even get to actually add onto those later in the future, to the point that even today, actually, for MPEG-2 applications, we're still doing additions that are being done for other markets, for the UK markets with where they're still using MPEG-2 nationally, with the US as well, where we're doing MPEG-2 for ETSI1, and we're still improving those over time. And the advantage of going with a software solution and with Ateme is that if you work with us and we have the SLA and we have the processing power, we can still update the software and make visually visualizable, improvements on our encoding.
Yep, and you know it's obviously the case that HEVC is not HEVC. That's the benefit of going with a software solution, as you just said. And it's not fixed, and an ASIC solution doesn't improve over time. Ours does, and that's why ours right now is basically 50% more efficient in terms of compression and VQ. So, okay. Do you see distribution moving to the cloud versus on-prem? Any advantages or disadvantages of this?
I'd say on cloud versus on-prem, it's kind of a cost driver. I'd say that's, for me, the main driver for this. And based on the feedback that we've had from customer. Again, that's what I was mentioning during the presentation. Some customers that through the content provider and service provider consolidation saw that their related service provider had an agreement with one or many public clouds, decided to move to the cloud, or at least start testing onto the cloud for many applications, including primary distribution. I'd say for some of the smaller content providers who are still doing primary distribution, it may not be worth it, at least on the long run. It may seem worth it on the first year. And again, if you're looking into working on the cloud, we will actually be able to deploy, whether it is on AWS, on Google Cloud, on Azure. But I'd say for the smaller guys, going that way may not necessarily be the most cost-effective one. It might be that after 2 or 3 years, we may see that the price to run on-prem was actually much better.
As with many things, you know, the answer typically is it depends. Still got to bring the video content in, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. And in the case of primary distribution, you still need to have an on-prem satellite uplink anyway.
All right. Those are all the questions we had. I think the next presentation is going to be on-prem and off-prem video cloud with a demo of low latency CMAF. It's going to be presented by Bill Rice. And after that, we have Secure Your Content, BISS-CA, presented by Yannick. I encourage everyone, if you enjoyed this presentation, to stay for those. And yeah, Robin, thank you so much for the presentation. It's a good job. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure for me as well. I'm just about to handle this over to Bill, who is now going to be your host.
We're a little early, I understand, but it's 4 minutes to just get set up. If you guys have the patience, please bear with us.
Hey, Bill, are you here?
I am.
Perfect. Would you mind stopping the recording for the primary distribution, optimize your distribution to affiliates presentation?